The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, cutting through the silence of my apartment like a scalpel through skin. I knew it was bad news before I even looked at the screen. Good news never arrives in the dead hours between midnight and dawn. The number was unfamiliar, but something about those 10 digits made my stomach clench with a recognition I couldn't quite place. Is this Marcus Chen? The voice was professional, carefully modulated in that way hospital staff perfect after years of delivering life-altering information to strangers in their pajamas. Yeah? I sat up in bed, already reaching for the lamp switch, preparing myself for whatever fresh hell was about to unfold. At 28, I'd learned that middle-of-the-night phone calls were never about lottery winnings or surprise inheritances. This is Dr. Sarah Martinez at St. Mary's Hospital. I'm calling about your parents, David and Linda Chen. They've been in a serious automobile accident. The words hit me like ice water, but not in the way you might expect. There was no immediate rush of concern, no desperate questions about their condition tumbling from my lips. Instead, there was something else, a cold, bitter satisfaction that surprised me with its intensity. After 15 years of silence, after being erased from their lives like a mistake they were embarrassed to acknowledge, fate had delivered them back to me. Are they alive? I asked, and even I could hear the detachment in my own voice. They're in critical condition. Mr. Chen has suffered severe internal bleeding and requires immediate surgery. Mrs. Chen is stable, but has sustained significant injuries. The reason I'm calling, Marcus, is that we need your help. I almost laughed. They needed my help. After all these years, after what they'd done, they needed something from me? The universe had a twisted sense of humor. What kind of help? I knew the answer before she said it. Some part of me had been waiting for this call my entire adult life, though I'd never admitted it to myself. Your father needs blood, a lot of it. He has AB-negative blood type, which is extremely rare. According to our records, you're listed as his next of kin and as a compatible donor from testing done years ago. Without a transfusion, he won't survive the surgery. AB-negative, the rarest blood type, shared by less than 1% of the population. The genetic lottery had played its hand, connecting me to the man who'd left me to die 15 years ago with invisible red threads that couldn't be severed by time or hatred. I was silent for so long that Dr. Martinez cleared her throat. Marcus, are you there? I'm here. I was here, in my small apartment 3 states away from where I'd grown up, surrounded by a life I'd built entirely without them. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd had to search for me, had to track down the son they'd abandoned, because now they needed something only I could give. Dr. Martinez, can I ask you something? Of course. Did they ask you to call me? Did they specifically request that I be contacted? There was a pause, and in that hesitation, I heard the truth. The request came from Mrs. Chen when she learned about your father's blood type and the shortage we're facing. She provided your contact information. So Linda remembered. After all these years, she remembered that her abandoned son carried the same rare blood that now might save her husband's life. She remembered, but only when she needed something. I'll be there in 4 hours, I said, already calculating the drive time to St. Mary's. Thank you, Marcus. Your father... He's not my father. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't apologize. He gave up that title 15 years ago. I'll be there for the blood donation, nothing more. I ended the call and sat in the darkness of my bedroom, listening to the familiar sounds of the city waking up outside my window. Somewhere, 300 miles away, the people who'd given me life were clinging to theirs. And the cosmic joke was that they needed me, the son they'd written off as acceptable collateral damage, to survive. The memories came flooding back as I packed a bag, moving through my apartment like a ghost, revisiting scenes from someone else's life. December 15th, 2008. I was 13 years old, and we were driving home from my grandmother's funeral in the mountains. It had been snowing, the kind of heavy, wet snow that turns highways into ice rinks. My parents had been fighting, really fighting, The kind of vicious, soul-crushing argument that had become their specialty in the months leading up to that night. I remember the exact moment everything changed. We were going around a curve, my father's hands tight on the steering wheel, my mother's voice rising in pitch as she screamed about his drinking, about the bills, about how she couldn't do this anymore. And then we were sliding, the world spinning in slow motion as our SUV lost its grip on the icy road and slammed into the guardrail. The impact threw me forward hard enough that my seatbelt cut into my chest, and I remember the taste of blood in my mouth, the way the world went quiet except for the hissing of the radiator. My parents were unconscious in the front seat, my mother's head at an unnatural angle, my father slumped over the steering wheel with blood trickling from his temple. But I was awake, hurt, scared, probably concussed, but awake. I tried to wake them up, shaking my mother's shoulder, calling their names until my voice went hoarse. When they finally stirred, when they finally looked back at me with dazed, panicked eyes, I thought everything would be okay. I thought they'd call for help, thought we'd wait together for the ambulances and police cars and everything would eventually return to normal. I was wrong. "The car won't start," my father said, his voice thick and strange. "We need to get help." "I can't walk," she whispered. "My leg, I think it's broken." They looked at each other then, one of those wordless conversations that married couples perfect over years of shared secrets and compromises. I didn't understand it then, but I understand it now. They were calculating, weighing options, making a choice that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Marcus," my father said, turning to look at me with eyes I didn't recognize, "you're going to have to go get help." "What? Dad, no, I can't leave you guys here. We should stay together." "Listen to me." His voice was different now, colder. "You're not hurt that bad. You can walk. There's a gas station about 2 miles back down the highway. You need to go there and call for help." "You won't get lost. Just follow the highway. And, Marcus?" He reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. "When you get there, call 911, but don't tell them exactly where we are right away. Give us some time first." Even at 13, I knew something was wrong with that instruction. Why wouldn't we want help to come immediately? But I took the money, because he was my father and I trusted him. And I climbed out of that wrecked SUV into the worst storm I'd ever seen. The walk nearly killed me. The temperature was dropping fast, and I wasn't dressed for a winter hike. My thin jacket was no match for the wind that cut through the mountains, and my sneakers filled with snow within the first 100 yards. I fell more times than I could count, sometimes sliding off the shoulder of the road into ditches that seemed to swallow me whole. But I kept walking, because they were counting on me, because that's what sons do for their parents. They save them, even when it costs them everything. When I finally reached the gas station, I was hypothermic and barely conscious. The clerk took one look at me and called an ambulance, and while we waited, I gave them the location of the accident, just like my parents had asked. The rescue teams found the SUV exactly where I'd left it, empty. My parents were gone, vanished into the storm without a trace, leaving behind only questions and the growing realization that they'd sent me away not to save them, but to save themselves. While I was stumbling through the blizzard, they'd somehow managed to get out of that car and disappear, abandoning their 13-year-old son to whatever fate awaited him. The official investigation concluded that they must have been picked up by another motorist, that they'd panicked and made poor decisions in the aftermath of the accident. But I knew better. I knew they'd made a choice that night, and that choice was to save themselves and leave me behind. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from severe hypothermia and frostbite that cost me 2 toes on my left foot. Social services tried to track down my parents, but David and Linda Chen had vanished as completely as if they'd never existed. New identities, new lives, new family. One that apparently didn't include the son who'd nearly died trying to save them. Now, 15 years later, as I loaded my medical bag into my car and began the drive towards St. Mary's Hospital, I couldn't help but marvel at how the wheel had turned. They'd left me to die once, and now they needed me to help them live. The blood running through my veins, the same rare type that marked me as my father's son, was the only thing standing between David Chen and the death he'd been willing to let me face all those years ago. I drove through the pre-dawn darkness, past sleeping towns and empty highways, carrying within my body the salvation they'd never deserved but desperately needed. Part of me wanted to turn around, to let them face the consequences of their choices the way they'd forced me to face mine. But I kept driving. Because somewhere along the way, I'd become the kind of person who saves people, even when those people don't deserve saving, especially when they don't deserve it. The hospital loomed ahead of me as the sun began to rise, its windows catching the first light of what promised to be a day that would change everything. I parked in the visitor's lot and sat for a moment, looking at the building where my parents lay broken and bleeding, waiting for their abandoned son to give them the gift of life. I thought about the 13-year-old boy who'd walk through a blizzard to save the people who'd betrayed him. I thought about the man I'd become in spite of their abandonment, or maybe because of it. And I thought about the choice I was about to make. Not because they deserved my help, but because I deserved to be the kind of person who could give it. I got out of the car and walked toward the hospital entrance, carrying their salvation in my veins and my own redemption in my hands. The automatic doors of St. Mary's Hospital whispered open, and I stepped into the fluorescent-lit limbo where life and death negotiations played out every day. The familiar smell hit me immediately, that cocktail of disinfectant, anxiety, and hope that permeated every medical facility I'd ever worked in. But this time, I wasn't here as Dr. Marcus Chen, trauma surgeon and respected member of the medical community. I was here as the abandoned son, carrying salvation in my veins for people who'd forfeited the right to call me family. The admissions desk was staffed by a tired-looking woman whose nameplate read Gloria Martinez. She looked up as I approached, and I caught the slight widening of her eyes as she took in my appearance. I knew what she saw. A man who looked like he'd driven through the night, stubble shadowing his jaw, clothes rumpled from sleeping in a car seat during a brief rest stop. What she couldn't see was the war raging inside me, the 15-year-old wounds that had been torn open by a single phone call. "I'm Dr. Marcus Chen," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm here about David and Linda Chen. Dr. Martinez called me about blood donation."
Gloria's expression shifted immediately to professional sympathy. "Of course, doctor. Dr. Martinez is expecting you. Let me page her right away." She picked up the phone, but before dialing, she hesitated. "Doctor, if you don't mind me asking, are you family?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Was I family? Biologically, yes. Legally, probably. Emotionally? That was the question that had been eating at me for the entire 4-hour drive. The question that had no clean answer. "It's complicated," I said finally. Gloria nodded as if that explained everything, which in a hospital it probably did. Families were messy, complicated things, and emergency rooms saw every variation of dysfunction humanity could produce. She made the call, and within minutes, Dr. Sarah Martinez appeared. A woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the sort of competent presence that immediately put people at ease. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming so quickly." She extended her hand, and I shook it, noting the firmness of her grip, the way she looked directly into my eyes. "I know this must be difficult." "How are they?" I asked, because it was the question expected of me, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Your father is in surgery now. The internal bleeding was worse than we initially thought, but Dr. Reeves is one of our best surgeons. Your mother is stable, broken ribs and a fractured collarbone, but nothing life-threatening. She's been asking about you." Something twisted in my chest at those words. Linda had been asking about me, After 15 years of silence, after abandoning me to freeze in a mountain blizzard, she was asking about me. The 13-year-old boy inside me, the one who'd never stopped hoping they'd come back, never stopped checking the mail for a letter or listening for the phone to ring, felt a dangerous flutter of something that might have been hope. "It's complicated," I said finally. Gloria nodded, as if that explained everything, which, in a hospital, it probably did. Families were messy, complicated things, and emergency rooms sought every variation of dysfunction humanity could produce. She made the call, and within minutes, Dr. Sarah Martinez appeared, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and the sort of competent presence that immediately put people at ease. "Dr. Chen, thank you for coming so quickly." She extended her hand, and I shook it, noting the firmness of her grip, the way she looked directly into my eyes. "I know this must be difficult." "How are they?" I asked, because it was the question expected of me, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Your father is in surgery now. The internal bleeding was worse than we initially thought, but Dr. Reeves is one of our best surgeons. Your mother is stable, broken ribs and a fractured collarbone, but nothing life-threatening. She's been asking about you." Something twisted in my chest at those words. Linda had been asking about me. After 15 years of silence, after abandoning me to freeze in a mountain blizzard, she was asking about me. The 13-year-old boy inside me, the one who never stopped hoping they'd come back, never stopped checking the mail for a letter or listening for the phone to ring, felt a dangerous flutter of something that might have been hope. "I need to be clear about something, Dr. Martinez," I said, forcing my voice to remain clinical, professional. "I'm here to donate blood, that's all. I'm not here as their son." She studied me for a moment, and I could see her processing this information, trying to understand the dynamics at play. "Of course, we appreciate any donation you're willing to make. Would you like to see your mother first, or would you prefer to go straight to donation?" The question caught me off guard. See Linda? Face to face for the first time in 15 years? I'd been so focused on the blood donation, on the clinical aspects of why I was here, that I hadn't really considered the reality of looking into the eyes of the woman who'd helped orchestrate my abandonment. "Blood donation first," I said quickly. "Let's get that taken care of." Dr. Martinez led me through a maze of corridors that blurred together in a haze of beige walls and motivational posters about hand hygiene. We passed the surgical suite where David Chen was fighting for his life, and I found myself slowing down, staring at the red light above the doors that indicated surgery in progress. "He's been in there for 2 hours, Dr. Martinez said softly. Dr. Reeves is optimistic, but he's lost a lot of blood." I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Inside that room, a team of medical professionals was working to save the life of a man who'd left his own child to die. They didn't know his history, didn't know what kind of person they were fighting to preserve. To them, he was just another patient, deserving of their best efforts and highest skill. The beautiful, terrible blindness of medicine. We save everyone regardless of whether they deserve it. The blood donation unit was quiet at this hour, staffed by a single technician who looked surprised to see us. "Emergency donation?" she asked, already preparing the necessary equipment. "AB negative for the patient in OR 3, Dr. Martinez confirmed.
The technician, her badge said Jenny, gestured to one of the donation chairs. "Have a seat, and I'll get you set up. You've donated before?" "Many times." I settled into the chair, rolling up my sleeve with practiced efficiency. As a doctor, I'd always been diligent about blood donation, understanding, better than most, how critical the supply was. The irony wasn't lost on me that my civic responsibility was now being put to the most personal test imaginable. Jenny worked quickly, checking my blood pressure, taking my temperature, asking the standard screening questions about recent travel and medications. As she prepared the needle, I found myself staring at my arm, at the vein she was swabbing with alcohol. This blood had been flowing through my body when I'd stumbled through that blizzard 15 years ago, when I'd nearly died trying to save people who'd already decided I was expendable. The needle slid in with a familiar pinch, and I watched my blood begin to flow through the tube, dark red and carrying with it all the genetic markers that connected me to David Chen. AB negative blood. Rare enough that most people never encountered anyone else who shared it. We were bound together by this biological fact, father and son linked by plasma and platelets and red blood cells, even when everything else had been severed. "You doing okay?" Jenny asked, monitoring the collection bag. Fine. I was lying. I wasn't fine. I was sitting in a hospital at dawn, watching my blood drain into a bag that would be transfused into a man who'd abandoned me, and I was anything but fine. But fine was what you said in hospitals when you were processing trauma too complex for small talk. Dr. Martinez had stepped away to take a call, leaving me alone with Jenny and the soft whir of medical equipment. In the silence, my mind wandered back to the years after the accident, the long journey from broken 13-year-old to the man sitting in this chair. Foster care had been a nightmare of shuffled placements and social workers with kind hearts and overworked schedules. I'd been angry, grieving, abandoned, and completely unprepared for a world where parents could simply disappear. The other kids in the system had their own tragedies, but most of them involved death or addiction or abuse. Terrible things, but explicable things. My story was different. My parents made a conscious choice to save themselves and leave me behind. There was a coldness to it that set me apart even among other abandoned children. Mrs. Patterson was the one who'd changed everything. She was a retired nurse who specialized in taking in the difficult cases, the kids who'd been bounced around the system until they were considered problems. She took one look at my file, the trauma, the abandonment, the growing behavioral issues, and saw something worth saving. "You're angry," she'd said on my first day in her house, as I sat sullen and defensive at her kitchen table. "That's good. Anger means you're still fighting." I'd stared at her like she was crazy. Good? The anger was eating me alive, turning me into someone I didn't recognize. I'd been in 3 fights at school in the past month, had been suspended twice, was failing classes I used to ace. "My parents left me to die," I'd said, testing her, waiting for her to flinch or offer empty platitudes about how they probably had good reasons. "Yes, they did," she'd replied matter-of-factly, "and that was their failure, not yours. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Mrs. Patterson didn't try to fix me or tell me everything would be okay or insist that my parents must have loved me despite their actions. She simply acknowledged the truth of what had happened and helped me figure out how to live with it. She taught me that survival wasn't just about enduring. It was about transforming pain into purpose.
Under her guidance, I'd channeled my anger into achievement. I studied like my life depended on it, because in many ways, it did. Every A on a report card was proof that I was worth more than my parents had believed. Every scholarship I earned was evidence that their assessment of my value had been catastrophically wrong. Medical school had been the ultimate vindication. Dr. Marcus Chen, the title that represented everything I'd built from the ashes of my abandonment. I specialized in trauma surgery because I understood, in ways my colleagues couldn't, what it meant to fight for your life when everything seemed hopeless. I was good at it, exceptionally good, because I brought something to the operating room that couldn't be taught: the absolute refusal to give up, even when giving up seemed like the rational choice. "All done," Jenny said, removing the needle and applying pressure to the puncture site. "That's a pint of AB negative liquid gold. Your father's lucky to have you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lucky to have me. If only she knew the truth, that David Chen had thrown away his claim to having me 15 years ago on a snowy mountain highway where he decided his 13-year-old son was acceptable collateral damage in whatever game he and Linda were playing. Medical school had been the ultimate vindication. Dr. Marcus Chen, the title that represented everything I'd built from the ashes of my abandonment. I specialized in trauma surgery because I understood, in ways my colleagues couldn't, what it meant to fight for your life when everything seemed hopeless. I was good at it, exceptionally good, because I brought something to the operating room that couldn't be taught: the absolute refusal to give up, even when giving up seemed like the rational choice. "All done," Jenny said, removing the needle and applying pressure to the puncture site. "That's a pint of AB negative liquid gold. Your father's lucky to have you." The words hit me like a physical blow. Lucky to have me. If only she knew the truth, that David Chen had thrown away his claim to having me 15 years ago on a snowy mountain highway where he decided his 13-year-old son was acceptable collateral damage in whatever game he and Linda were playing. Dr. Martinez returned as Jenny was finishing up, carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression medical professionals perfected when they needed to deliver difficult information. Dr. Chen, your mother would like to see you. She's been quite insistent. I felt my carefully constructed composure begin to crack. I'd come here prepared to donate blood, a clinical transaction that could be completed without emotional engagement. I hadn't prepared myself for conversations, for looking into Linda's eyes, for whatever manipulation or justification she might try to offer. I don't think that's a good idea, I said, standing up and testing my balance. The blood donation had left me slightly lightheaded, but it was nothing compared to the vertigo I felt at the prospect of facing my mother. She says she has something important to tell you about that night, about the accident. Those words stopped me cold. Something about that night? After 15 years of silence, Linda suddenly had something to say about the night they'd abandoned me? Part of me, the part that had never stopped being that confused, hurt 13-year-old, desperately wanted to know what she could possibly say that would make any of this make sense. But the adult part of me, the part that had learned to protect itself through years of therapy and hard-won wisdom, knew better. Whatever Linda had to say would be self-serving, designed to make me more compliant, more willing to help. She was manipulating me just like they manipulated me that night, using my own love for them as a weapon against me. I don't need to hear it, I said firmly. The blood donation is complete. That's why I came. Dr. Chen, I understand this is complicated, but your mother seemed to think... My mother gave up the right to think anything about me 15 years ago. The words came out sharper than I had intended, and I saw Dr. Martinez flinch slightly. I took a breath, forcing myself back into professional mode. I'm sorry, it's difficult, but I've done what I came here to do. As I started to leave, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it reflexively and felt the blood drain from my face. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the message was clear. Marcus, this is your mother. They gave me your number from the contact forms. Please don't leave without seeing me. There are things about that night you don't understand. Things that will change everything. Room 314. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking slightly. Things I didn't understand? What could I possibly not understand about being abandoned by my own parents? What context could make that betrayal acceptable?
But even as I told myself I didn't care, even as I insisted that nothing Linda could say would matter, I found myself walking toward the elevators instead of the exit. Because the 13-year-old boy inside me, the one who'd never stopped hoping for an explanation, never stopped believing that maybe, somehow, there was a reason for what they'd done, was still strong enough to override my adult judgment. I pressed the button for the 3rd floor, watching the numbers climb, carrying me toward a conversation I'd been avoiding for 15 years. My reflection in the polished elevator doors looked haunted, exhausted, like a man being pulled toward his own destruction by forces he couldn't resist. The doors opened onto a typical hospital floor, long corridors lined with rooms where people faced their mortality in privacy and discomfort. Room 314 was halfway down the hall, and I could see through the partially open door that someone was inside, waiting. I stood outside that room for a full minute, my hand raised to knock, paralyzed by the weight of everything that had brought me to this moment. Inside that room was the woman who'd given birth to me, who'd raised me for 13 years, who'd sung me lullabies and patched my scraped knees, and then sent me out into a blizzard to die so she could save herself. What could she possibly say that would matter now? What words existed that could bridge 15 years of abandonment and betrayal? I knocked on the door, and Linda's voice, older now, frailer but unmistakably hers, called out for me to come in. I pushed open the door and stepped across the threshold, crossing from the safety of anonymity back into the dangerous territory of family, where love and hatred often wore each other's faces, and the deepest wounds were always inflicted by the people who were supposed to protect you. Linda Chen lay in the hospital bed like a broken bird, her left arm in a sling, her face painted with bruises that bloomed purple and yellow against pale skin. The years had not been kind to her, or perhaps the weight of whatever secrets she'd been carrying had worn her down from the inside. She was 53 now, but looked older, her dark hair streaked with premature silver, and her eyes carrying a weariness that went deeper than physical injury. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the sterile space of the hospital room. 15 years collapsed into nothing and stretched into eternity simultaneously. I saw her taking inventory of the man I'd become, the expensive clothes, the confident posture, the medical degree that probably surprised her. I wondered what story she told herself about my fate after they'd abandoned me. Had she imagined me dead, homeless, broken beyond repair? "You look good, Marcus," she said, and there was something in her voice. Pride, maybe? Or regret. "You successful." "No thanks to you." The words came out before I could stop them, carrying 15 years of accumulated bitterness. She flinched but didn't look away. "You have every right to be angry."
Angry? I stepped fully into the room but kept my distance from the bed, positioning myself near the window where I could see the parking lot 3 floors below. Angry doesn't begin to cover it, Linda. Angry is what you feel when someone cuts you off in traffic. What I feel? There isn't a word for it. There are things you don't understand about that night. Don't. I held up a hand, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to justify what you did. I was 13 years old. 13! And you sent me out into a blizzard to die so you could save yourselves. Linda struggled to sit up straighter in the bed, wincing as the movement aggravated her injuries. We didn't send you out there to die. We sent you to get help. Bullshit. The profanity felt good, felt necessary. You told me to call 911, but not to tell them where you were right away. What kind of emergency response instruction is that? Unless... I paused, pieces clicking into place with awful clarity. Unless you needed time to disappear before help arrived? Her silence was confirmation enough. Jesus Christ, I whispered, sinking into the visitor's chair despite my intention to remain standing. I always suspected, but hearing you not deny it, you planned it. The whole thing was planned. Not the accident, Linda said quickly. The accident was real, but afterwards? Yes, we made a choice. A choice. I repeated the words like they were poison in my mouth. You made a choice to abandon your child, to let me think I was saving you when really I was just what? A convenient distraction? A way to buy time? Linda's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy for her. I'd cried enough tears for both of us over the years. Marcus, your father and I, we were in trouble. Serious trouble. People were looking for us. Dangerous people, and staying meant putting you in even more danger. So instead, you put me in a blizzard and left me to freeze to death. Much safer. We thought you'd make it to the gas station. We thought you'd be okay. You thought. I stood up abruptly, unable to sit still with the rage building inside me. You gambled with my life based on what you thought. And when that gamble didn't pay off the way you hoped, when I spent 3 weeks in the hospital with hypothermia and frostbite, when I lost 2 toes and nearly died, what did you think then? She was crying openly now, tears streaming down her bruised face. We thought you were dead. For months, we thought we'd killed you. It was only later that we found out you'd survived, that you were in foster care. And yet you never came back. Never tried to contact me, never sent so much as a fucking birthday card. We couldn't. Don't you understand? We were being hunted. Coming back would have meant death for all of us. I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the sterile walls. Hunted. Right. Let me guess. You were mixed up with the wrong people, made some bad investments, borrowed money from loan sharks, the classic American tragedy. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Linda? What was so important, so life-threatening that you had to sacrifice your own son? She was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, I could hear the machines monitoring her vital signs, the distant sound of hospital activity in the corridor, the whisper of my own breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Your father and I stole money from very dangerous people. $3 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. $3 million. Not gambling debts or bad business deals, theft on a massive scale. He what? He was working for a company that was laundering money for organized crime. He found out what they were doing, and he took it. He said it was evidence, that he was going to turn them in, but then he realized they'd never let us live if he did. So we ran. I stared at her, trying to process this information. David Chen, the father I remembered as a quiet accountant who worried about mortgage payments and grocery bills, had stolen $3 million from the mob? You're lying. I'm not. I have proof. Linda gestured weakly toward the nightstand beside her bed. Look in my purse. There's a safe deposit box key. Everything's there. Documents, bank records, evidence of what they were doing. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving toward the nightstand. Linda's purse was a worn leather bag that looked like it had seen better decades. Inside, among the usual detritus of a woman's life, tissues, breath mints, and nearly empty tube of lipstick, was a small silver key attached to a tag from First National Bank. Box 1247. Everything's in there. I held the key, feeling its weight in my palm. Such a small thing to contain the explanation for 15 years of abandonment and pain. Even if this is true, I said slowly, it doesn't justify what you did to me. No, it doesn't. But Marcus, you have to understand, we thought they'd killed us all if we stayed. Sending you for help was supposed to give us time to get away, but it was also supposed to save your life. We thought you'd be safer without us. Safer? I turned the key over in my fingers, studying the way the fluorescent light caught its surface. You thought a 13-year-old boy would be safer alone in the foster care system than with his parents. We thought they'd use you to get to us. We thought they'd hurt you to make us give back the money. So instead, you hurt yourselves. Preemptive strike. Linda's heart monitor began beeping faster, reflecting her increasing agitation. We were wrong. I know we were wrong. But Marcus, we were terrified. We were making impossible choices in an impossible situation. No, I closed my fist around the key. You were making selfish choices. You chose your own safety over your child's life. Don't dress it up as some noble sacrifice. The door to the room opened suddenly, and Dr. Martinez stepped in, her expression concerned. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Mrs. Chen, your heart rate is elevated. Is everything all right? We're having a family discussion, I said, the word family bitter on my tongue. Dr. Martinez looked between Linda and me, clearly picking up on the tension in the room. Perhaps this would be better continued when Mrs. Chen has had more time to recover. No, Linda said quickly. Please, Dr. Martinez, I need to finish this conversation. The doctor hesitated, then nodded. I'll be at the nurse's station if you need anything. She left, but I noticed she didn't close the door completely. Marcus, there's something else you need to know about that night. I waited, though part of me wanted to walk out of the room and never look back. We weren't the only ones who disappeared. The people your father stole from, they were killed 3 days later, all of them, execution style.
If we'd stayed, if we'd tried to turn them in or return the money, we would have been next. Convenient timing, I said, though something in her tone made me believe her. It was in all the papers. The Castellano organization. That's who David was working for. Federal investigation, RICO charges, the works. We weren't running from loan sharks, Marcus. We were running from the mob.
The Costello name meant something to me, though it took a moment to place it. I'd been in medical school when the story broke. A massive, organized crime bust that had made national headlines. Bodies found in various locations around the city, evidence of a power struggle within the crime family, arrests that reached into the highest levels of state and local government. You're saying Dad was mixed up in all that? He was their accountant. He kept their books, moved their money, made their illegal activities look legitimate. When he realized what was happening, when he understood that we were all complicit in something that could destroy us, he made a desperate choice. I sank back into the visitor's chair, overwhelmed by the implications of what she was telling me. If this was true, if my parents really had been caught up in organized crime, then the night of the accident took on an entirely different meaning. They hadn't just been running for consequences. They'd been running for their lives. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I'm dying." The words hung in the air between us like a death sentence. "What?" "Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. I've got maybe 3 months left, probably less." Linda's voice was steady, matter of fact, as if she were discussing the weather. "The doctors here don't know yet. It wasn't relevant to treating the accident injuries, but I know." I stared at her, my medical training automatically cataloging the signs I should have noticed. The weight loss, the pallor, the way she held herself as if everything hurt. Pancreatic cancer was a death sentence, especially at stage 4. 3 months was optimistic. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand that we didn't abandon you out of cruelty or indifference. We abandoned you to save your life. And I need you to forgive us before I die." "Forgive you." I repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. "You want forgiveness." "I need it. I can't die carrying this guilt." "Then you should have thought of that 15 years ago." I stood up, pacing to the window and back. "You don't get to drop a bombshell like this and then ask for absolution. You don't get to reframe child abandonment as parental sacrifice and expect me to thank you for it." "Marcus, no, listen to me." I moved closer to the bed, close enough to see the fear in her eyes. "Do you know what happened to me after you left? Do you want to hear about the foster homes, the social workers, the years of therapy trying to understand why my parents threw me away?" "We didn't throw you away. That's exactly what you did." I was shouting now, 15 years of suppressed rage finally finding its voice. "You threw me away to save yourselves, and now you want me to pat you on the head and tell you it was all okay because you were scared?" Linda was sobbing, her breath coming in short gasps that made her heart monitor beep frantically. But I couldn't stop. The dam had burst and everything I'd held back was pouring out. "Do you know I became a doctor because of what you did to me? Do you know I specialize in trauma surgery because I understand what it feels like to be broken and abandoned? My entire life, my entire career, my entire identity was built on the foundation of your betrayal." "Marcus, please. No, listen to me. I've spent 15 years proving that I was worth more than you thought I was. 15 years becoming the kind of person who saves people instead of abandoning them. And now you want me to give you my blood to save the man who sent me out to die, and then you want me to forgive you for it?" The door burst open and Dr. Martinez rushed in, followed by a nurse. Linda's heart monitor was alarming, her breathing rapid and shallow. "What's happening here?" Dr. Martinez demanded, moving to check Linda's vital signs. "A family reunion?" I said bitterly. The nurse was already preparing a syringe of something, probably a sedative. Linda grabbed my hand with her uninjured arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "The key," she gasped, "the safe deposit box. Go there. See the truth for yourself." "Mrs. Chen, you need to calm down," Dr. Martinez said, signaling to the nurse. "Promise me Linda continued, ignoring the medical team. Promise me you'll look. I stared down at her, this broken woman who'd given me life and then nearly taken it away, who was now dying of cancer and begging for forgiveness I wasn't sure I could give. I'll look, I said finally, but it doesn't change anything. The nurse administered the sedative, and Linda's grip on my hand gradually loosened. Her eyes remained fixed on mine as the medication took effect, and in them I saw something I'd never seen before. Not just fear or guilt, but a kind of desperate love that was 15 years too late. As she drifted into medicated sleep, I found myself holding her hand. This woman who'd been mother and abandoner, protector and betrayer. The complexity of what I felt was overwhelming. Rage and pity, love and hatred, all twisted together into something that hurt to look at directly. Dr. Martinez checked Linda's monitor, satisfied that her vital signs were stabilizing. Dr. Chen, I think it would be best if you gave your mother some time to rest. She's not my mother, I said automatically, but the words felt hollow now. Whatever your relationship, this level of stress isn't good for her recovery. Dr. Martinez's tone was professional, but not unsympathetic. Perhaps you could come back when she's stronger. I nodded, gently releasing Linda's hand and stepping back from the bed. She looked peaceful in sleep, younger somehow, like the woman I remembered from childhood bedtime stories and goodnight kisses. Dr. Chen? Dr. Chen. A new voice called my attention. I turned to see a man in surgical scrubs approaching. Tall, graying at the temples, with the confident bearing of someone used to making life and death decisions. Dr. Reeves, Dr. Martinez said. This is Dr. Marcus Chin, the blood donor. Dr. Reeves extended his hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. Your donation made all the difference. I shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact. How is he?
The surgery went very well. We were able to repair the damage and stop the internal bleeding. He lost a significant amount of blood, but the transfusion stabilized him. He's being moved to ICU now for monitoring, but I'm optimistic about his recovery. Optimistic about his recovery? David Chen, the man who'd stolen $3 million from the mob and abandoned his son to cover his escape, was going to live? The irony was almost too much to bear. Can I see him? I heard myself asking, though I wasn't sure why. He's still unconscious from the anesthesia and will be for several more hours, but if you'd like to wait... I nodded, though I couldn't explain to myself why I wanted to see the man who'd helped destroy my childhood. Maybe it was morbid curiosity. Maybe it was the need to see with my own eyes that he was really alive, really saved by my blood. Maybe I was just a glutton for punishment. Dr. Reeves led me to the ICU, a sterile environment where machines beeped and hummed around beds containing the critically ill. David was in bed 7, surrounded by monitors and IV lines, looking smaller and more fragile than the man I remembered. 15 years had aged him more than they should have. His hair was completely gray now, his face lined with stress and whatever guilt he'd been carrying. He looked like a man who'd been running for a very long time and was finally too tired to run anymore. I stood beside his bed, studying the face that was so similar to my own, the same bone structure, the same stubborn jawline, the same hands that were now bruised from IV needles. My blood was flowing through his veins right now, keeping him alive, binding us together in the most intimate way possible. A nurse approached to check his vital signs, and I stepped back to give her room. "Are you family?" she asked, the same question I'd been asked repeatedly since arriving at the hospital. "I'm his blood donor," I said, which was true, but not really an answer. She smiled. "AB negative, right? You probably saved his life." Saved his life? The phrase echoed in my head as I watched the rise and fall of David's chest, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor, the IV drip feeding medication into his system. I'd saved the life of the man who'd nearly cost me mine. My phone buzzed and I checked it reflexively. Another unknown number, another text message. "Dr. Chen, this is Detective Ray Santos with the FBI. We need to speak with you about your parents. It's urgent." I stared at the message, my blood running cold. The FBI. 15 years later, and whatever David and Linda had been running from was apparently still relevant. I looked back at the man in the hospital bed, wondering what other secrets he'd been carrying, what other consequences were about to catch up with all of us. Linda had said the Castellano organization had been destroyed years ago, but clearly someone was still interested in their business. I texted back. "I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. How did you get this number?" The response came immediately. "We've been monitoring your parents since they resurfaced. The car accident brought them out of hiding. We need to talk before they wake up."
Before they wake up, the implication was clear. Whatever the FBI wanted to discuss, it wasn't something they wanted David and Linda to know about. I took one last look at my father, this stranger who had given me half my DNA and then tried to erase me from his life. The man whose life I'd just saved with my blood, who was lying here vulnerable and unconscious while federal agents circled like sharks. The complexity of what I felt was staggering. Love and hatred, mercy and revenge, family obligation and self-preservation, all tangled together in a knot I couldn't begin to unravel. I walked out of the ICU, leaving David to his machines and medications, and headed for the elevator. Detective Santos and his urgent conversation would have to wait. I had a safe deposit box to visit, secrets to uncover, and a 15-year-old mystery to finally solve. The truth was waiting for me in box 1247, and after everything I'd learned in the past few hours, I wasn't sure I was ready to handle whatever it contained. But ready or not, it was time to face the complete truth about the night my parents chose to save themselves and gamble with my life. Time to learn whether Linda's story of mob connections and mortal danger was real, or just another lie designed to manipulate me into forgiveness. The elevator doors closed, carrying me away from the ICU and toward answers that might change everything I thought I knew about my past, my parents, and myself. First National Bank sat on a corner downtown like a fortress of marble and glass, its imposing columns and bronze doors speaking to an era when financial institutions were built to project permanence and trustworthiness. I sat in my car across the street for 10 minutes, the safe deposit box key burning a hole in my pocket, while I tried to summon the courage to walk through those doors and confront whatever truth Linda had hidden away. The FBI text from Detective Santos kept flashing through my mind. They'd been monitoring my parents since they resurfaced. The accident had blown their cover after 15 years of careful hiding, which meant that whatever was in that safe deposit box wasn't just family history. It was evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Unknown number again. "Dr. Chen, this is Detective Santos. We really need to talk." "How did you get my number?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew. "We've been monitoring communications to and from your parents since the accident. Hospital records, phone calls, text messages. Your mother's message to you about the safe deposit box caught our attention." "Of course it did." "You're watching everything." "Dr. Chen, your parents were involved in one of the largest money laundering operations in the history of organized crime. When your father took that money and disappeared, he didn't just steal from criminals. He walked away with evidence that could have brought down dozens of corrupt officials, judges, and law enforcement officers. That evidence is still valuable and still dangerous." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "If you've been monitoring them, why didn't you arrest them?" "Because we need what they have. The original Castellano organization may be gone, but the corruption network they built is still active. New players, same game. We've been waiting 15 years for David and Linda to surface so we could make a deal." "What kind of deal?" "The evidence in exchange for immunity and witness protection. But now there's a complication. Me. You.
The blood donation, the hospital records, the family connection, it's all over the system now. People who've been hunting your parents for 15 years know exactly where to find them, and you. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. By coming to the hospital, by saving David's life, I'd inadvertently expose them, and myself. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. That's why I need you to get to that safe deposit box before anyone else does. Can I meet you at the bank? I looked across the street at First National, wondering how many other people might be watching it right now. How do I know I can trust you? Because I'm the only one offering to keep you alive, Dr. Chen. Your parents made powerful enemies 15 years ago. Those enemies have long memories and longer reach. Right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and a very unpleasant conversation with people who don't care about your medical degree or your clean record. The line went dead, leaving me alone with the weight of choices I'd never asked to make. I could drive away right now, go back to my life, pretend none of this had happened. But Linda was dying. David was lying unconscious in a hospital bed with my blood in his veins. And apparently there were people with guns who wanted to have a chat with all of us. I got out of the car and walked across the street, the October air sharp against my skin. The bank's lobby was marble and mahogany, all hushed reverence for money and its power. A security guard nodded as I approached the reception desk. I need access to a safe deposit box, I told the woman behind the counter, showing her the key. She examined it, then checked my ID against some kind of database. Box 1247. I'll need to verify your access authorization. My mother, Linda Chen, is the box holder. She's currently hospitalized and gave me the key to retrieve some documents. The woman's expression shifted to professional sympathy. I'm sorry to hear about your mother. However, I'll need written authorization from the box holder to grant access to a non-signatory. Shit. Of course it wouldn't be that simple. Is there any way? Marcus Chen? A voice behind me made me turn. A man in his 40s, Hispanic, wearing a rumpled suit and the kind of tired expression that came from too many years chasing criminals. Detective Ray Santos, FBI. He showed his badge to both me and the bank employee. We spoke on the phone. The woman behind the counter suddenly looked very nervous. Is there some kind of problem? Ma'am, we have a federal warrant for the contents of box 1247. Santos produced a folded document. Dr. Chen here is assisting with our investigation. I watched the bureaucratic dance play out. Forms were consulted, supervisors were called, signatures were verified. Within 10 minutes, we were being escorted to the vault by a bank official who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Dr. Chen, Santos said quietly as we walked. Before we open this box, I need you to understand something. Whatever's in there, it's going to change your life. There's no going back to ignorance after this. My life changed the moment I got that phone call. At least now I'll know why. The vault was exactly what you'd expect. Sterile, secure, lined with hundreds of metal boxes containing the secrets and treasures of strangers. Box 1247 was shoulder high, larger than I had expected. It required 2 keys, Linda's and a bank master key, to open. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents, and something that made my breath catch. A small digital video camera, the kind popular 15 years ago. Santos carefully removed the contents, laying everything out on a small table the bank provided for examining box contents. The envelope contained exactly what Linda had promised. Bank records, financial statements, photographs, and what appeared to be accounting ledgers written in David's precise handwriting. Jesus, Santos muttered, flipping through the documents. This is better than we hoped. Transaction records, wire transfers, account numbers. Your father documented everything. I picked up one of the photographs. It showed a group of men in expensive suits at what looked like a restaurant or club.
I recognized some of the faces from news coverage of the Castellano investigation 15 years ago. Crime family members who'd been arrested or killed in the cleanup 15 years ago. Is that my father? I pointed to a man in the background of the photo, partially obscured by shadows. Santos studied the image. Yeah, that's David. He was deeper in this than we realized. But it was the video camera that drew my attention. A piece of tape on the side was labeled, "For Marcus," in Linda's handwriting. Can we watch this? I asked.
Santos looked around the vault, noting the bank official who was trying very hard to pretend he wasn't listening to every word. Not here, but yes, we need to see what's on it. 20 minutes later, we were in Santos's unmarked car in a parking garage, the video camera connected to a tablet he'd produced from his briefcase. The screen flickered to life, and suddenly I was looking at my parents, as they'd been 15 years ago, younger, healthier, but already showing the strain of whatever they'd gotten themselves into. The video was clearly shot in secret, the camera hidden somewhere in what looked like David's home office. Linda was pacing back and forth while David sat at his desk, head in his hands. "We can't keep doing this," Linda was saying. "They're asking questions, David, real questions about the books, about where the money goes." "I know." David's voice was tired, defeated. "But if we try to get out now, they'll kill us. You know that. And if we stay, they'll eventually figure out that you've been skimming. That camera you put in Sal's office, those recordings you've been making, when they find out about that, we're dead anyway." "Camera? Recordings?" I looked at Santos, who was taking notes while watching. "What happened to the recordings?" David asked on the video. "Hidden, along with copies of all the financial records. If something happens to us, if we disappear or turn up dead, there are instructions for everything to be turned over to the FBI. And Marcus?" Linda stopped pacing. Even on the small screen, I could see the pain in her face. "Marcus can't know any of this. If they even suspect he has information, they'll use him to get to us. Our only choice is to disappear completely." "He's our son, Linda, which is exactly why we have to protect him, even if it means he hates us forever." The camera angle shifted slightly, and I realized David must have moved it. Now I could see both my parents clearly, looking older and more desperate than I'd ever seen them. "There's another option," David said quietly. "No," Linda's voice was sharp. "We are not taking that money and running. That makes us thieves instead of witnesses." "We're already thieves, Linda. I've been moving their money, hiding their assets, helping them evade taxes and federal investigations. Taking some of it and disappearing might be the only way to keep our family alive. If we take their money, we can never come back. Never contact Marcus, never see him graduate or get married or have children. Is that really the life you want?" David was quiet for a long moment. "I want my son to live to have a life at all." The video continued for another 10 minutes, showing my parents making the agonizing decision to steal the money and disappear. But what struck me most was how many times they mentioned protecting me, keeping me safe, making sure I could have a normal life even if it meant they couldn't be part of it. "They really thought they were saving my life," I said quietly when the video ended. "They probably were," Santos replied. "The Castellano organization had a reputation for eliminating entire families when they felt betrayed. Your parents stealing that money and disappearing likely kept all three of you alive."
But they sent me out into a blizzard. They sent you to get help, knowing that when the police arrived, you'd be safe. They couldn't know about the hypothermia, couldn't predict how bad the storm would get. But they ensured that when authorities found you, you'd be taken into protective custody as a victim, not hunted as a conspirator. I stared at the blank screen of the tablet, trying to reconcile this new understanding with 15 years of hurt and anger. My parents hadn't abandoned me out of selfishness or cruelty. They'd sacrificed their relationship with me to keep me alive. "Dr. Chen," Santos said gently, "we need to talk about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "I mean that opening this safe deposit box has probably triggered alerts all over the criminal underground. People have been watching for any sign of David and Linda Chen for 15 years. Bank records, credit reports, hospital admissions, it's all monitored by people with very sophisticated resources. The reality of my situation was starting to sink in. How much danger am I in? A lot. But we can protect you if you cooperate with our investigation. What kind of cooperation? Santos pulled out another folder from his briefcase. Witness protection. New identity, relocation, federal marshals. In exchange, you help us use this evidence to bring down the current iteration of the criminal network your father exposed. What about my parents? Same deal, if they survive. But Dr. Chen, your mother's cancer. Even with the best medical care, she doesn't have long. And your father's recovery is going to take time. Time we might not have. I thought about the video I'd just watched. About parents who loved me enough to sacrifice everything, including their relationship with me, to keep me safe. They'd made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. And now I was facing choices that were just as impossible.
The evidence in that safe deposit box could bring down criminals and corrupt officials, could provide justice for victims of a network that had been operating for decades. But using it would mean accepting that my old life was over, that Marcus Chen, the trauma surgeon, would have to disappear just as completely as David and Linda Chen had 15 years ago. We pulled into the hospital parking lot, and I could see unfamiliar cars positioned strategically around the building. Men in suits who tried too hard to look casual, talking into earpieces and watching everyone who entered or left. "They're here," Santos said grimly, "and they're not taking any chances this time." I thought about the 13-year-old boy who'd walked through a blizzard to save parents who'd already decided to save themselves. About the man I'd become because of that abandonment, the strength I'd found in the darkness of foster care, and the determination that had carried me through medical school and residency. My parents had made their choice 15 years ago. They'd chosen love over presence, safety over family, survival over certainty. Now it was my turn to choose. I could walk away from all of this, the evidence, the investigation, the danger. Let Santos handle it, go back to my life, pretend I'd never learned the truth about that night in the mountains. Or I could do what my parents had done, make the hard choice, the dangerous choice, the choice that might save lives even if it cost me everything I'd built. I looked at the hospital where David and Linda waited, probably unaware that their past had finally caught up with them, where FBI agents and criminals were circling like wolves around wounded prey. "Santos," I said, "what exactly do you need me to do?" He smiled grimly. "Help us finish what your parents started 15 years ago. Help us bring down the people they've been running from." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 15 years of anger and abandonment shifting into something else. Purpose, maybe. Understanding. The recognition that sometimes love meant making choices that looked like betrayal, and sometimes forgiveness meant accepting that people could be both heroes and villains in the same story. "Okay," I said, "let's go save my parents." Again. As we walked toward the hospital entrance, past the men who were trying very hard to look like they belonged there, I realized that I was finally, truly, ready to forgive David and Linda Chen. Not because what they'd done was right, but because I finally understood that they'd done it out of love. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to prove that I was worthy of the sacrifice they had made for me all those years ago. The hospital felt different as Santos and I walked through the main entrance, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the medical equipment humming throughout the building. I could sense the watchers immediately, men positioned at strategic points who looked up from newspapers they weren't really reading, women who lingered too long at information desks while speaking quietly into phones. "How many?" I asked Santos under my breath as we headed for the elevators. "At least 6 that I can see, probably twice that many we can't." He pressed the button for the 3rd floor. "The good news is they can't make a move inside the hospital without causing a scene. Too many witnesses, too much security. And the bad news? Eventually we all have to leave." The elevator rose with agonizing slowness, each floor bringing us closer to a confrontation I still wasn't sure I was prepared for.
When the doors opened on the third floor, I saw Dr. Martinez waiting for us, her expression tense. Dr. Chen, thank God you're back. Your father became conscious about an hour ago and has been asking for you repeatedly. He seems very agitated about something. What about my mother?
Still sedated, but stable. However, she hesitated, glancing at Santos. The people I mentioned on the phone are still here. They've been very persistent about speaking with your parents. Santos showed his badge. Detective Santos, FBI. Where are these people now? Waiting room near the ICU. They said they'd wait as long as necessary. Dr. Martinez's voice carried the kind of professional concern that meant she'd recognize danger even if she couldn't name it. I need to see my father, I said. Dr. Chen, Santos caught my arm. These people aren't going to wait forever. Once they realize we have the evidence from the safe deposit box, they're going to escalate. We need to move fast. David was awake when I entered his ICU room, his eyes clearer than I had expected for someone who had undergone major surgery hours earlier. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, recognition mixed with something that might have been regret or fear or relief. Marcus, his voice was hoarse from the breathing tube. You came. I came for the blood donation, I said, though the words felt automatic now, a defensive wall I wasn't sure I needed anymore. The blood, he managed a weak smile. AB negative, the curse that connects us. I pulled a chair close to his bed, noting how small he looked connected to all the machines. Linda told me about the Castellano organization, about the money you took. David's eyes closed briefly. She told you everything? I saw the video, Dad. The one where you and Mom decided to disappear to protect me. You saw? His voice broke. Marcus, you have to understand. I do understand. Finally. I leaned forward, taking his hand carefully to avoid the IV lines. You didn't abandon me because you stopped loving me. You abandoned me because you loved me too much to let them kill me. David began crying then, tears flowing down his cheeks as 15 years of guilt and regret finally found release. We thought about you every day. Every single day. Your mother. It nearly killed her, not knowing if you were okay, not being able to contact you. I know. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. No, David squeezed my hand with surprising strength. You have nothing to be sorry for. We made a choice that saved your life, but destroyed your childhood. You had every right to hate us. I did hate you. For years. I hated you both so much that it felt like it was burning me alive. But I paused, searching for words to express something I'd never admitted to myself. I also never stopped hoping you'd come back, never stopped looking for you in crowds, never stopped expecting you to call. We wanted to. God, how we wanted to. But Marcus, they were watching everything. Bank accounts, social security numbers, school records. If we'd tried to contact you, they would have found us all. The FBI agent with me says there are people here now, people who aren't law enforcement. David's heart monitor began beeping faster. How many? At least 6 that we can see. They found us. He struggled to sit up. Marcus, you need to leave now, before they realize you're connected to us. It's too late for that. The blood donation, the hospital records, they know who I am. David closed his eyes in despair. We tried so hard to keep you safe. You did keep me safe. For 15 years, you kept me safe. But that's over now. Now it's my turn to protect you. What do you mean? I'm going to testify, Dad. I'm going to help the FBI use your evidence to bring down the people who've been hunting us. All of us. Marcus, no. You have a life, a career. I have a life because of the choice you made 15 years ago. Now I need to make a choice too. I stood up, feeling more certain than I had about anything in years. I need to finish what you started.
The door to the ICU room opened and Santos stepped in. Dr. Chen, we have a problem. The men in the waiting room are asking to speak with hospital administration about visiting rights for family members. They're claiming to be your father's brothers. David made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. The Torino brothers, Vincent and Michael, they're the ones who took over after Castellano went down.
Torino. Santos's expression darkened. That's worse than I thought. These aren't just enforcers. They're the current heads of the organization. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're not here to send a message or make threats. They're here to clean up loose ends. Permanently. The weight of the situation settled over me like a lead blanket. We weren't just dealing with criminals seeking revenge. We were facing people who had built their lives on making problems disappear. How do we get out of here? I asked. We don't. Not all of us. Santos pulled out his phone. I'm calling for backup, but it'll take time to get a full team here. In the meantime, we need to separate your parents and get them into protective custody. Linda's not going anywhere, I said. She's too sick to move, and even if she wasn't, she'd never leave David. Then we make our stand here, Santos said grimly. But Dr. Chen, I need you to understand something. If this goes bad, if the Torino brothers decide to cut their losses and eliminate everyone who knows about the evidence, witness protection might not be an option anymore. I looked at David, who was listening to our conversation with growing alarm. You're talking about a shootout in a hospital? I'm talking about survival. Yours, your parents, and the dozens of other patients on this floor who don't deserve to get caught in the crossfire. The intercom crackled to life. Dr. Martinez to the ICU nurses station. Dr. Martinez to the ICU nurses station, urgent. Through the glass walls of the ICU, I could see activity in the hallway. Security guards moving with purpose, nurses looking confused and concerned. Something was happening. Santos stepped out to speak with the ICU staff, leaving me alone with David. Marcus, he said urgently, there's something else you need to know. The evidence your mother hid, it's not just about the Castellano organization. There are recordings of conversations with judges, police commissioners, federal prosecutors. People who are still in power, still making decisions that affect thousands of lives. Dad, listen to me. If something happens to us, if they get to us before the FBI can use what we have, those people will continue destroying lives for decades. The corruption we exposed goes all the way to the top of law enforcement in 3 states. The magnitude of what he was saying hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about our family anymore. It was about justice for countless victims of a system that had been corrupted from within. Santos returned, his expression grim. They're making their move. Vincent Torino is demanding to see your father immediately, claiming family emergency privileges. Hospital administration is stalling, but they can't hold them off longer. What about the backup you called for? 20 minutes out, minimum. Probably longer in downtown traffic. I stood up, my mind racing through possibilities, calculating odds, weighing risks. 15 years of trauma surgery had taught me to make life and death decisions under pressure, to find solutions when there seemed to be none. Santos, can you get Linda moved to this room? Probably, but why? Because if we're going to make a stand, we keep the family together. And because I have an idea. 10 minutes later, a team of nurses wheeled Linda's bed into David's ICU room. She was awake now, groggy from the sedatives, but alert enough to understand the gravity of the situation. Marcus? She reached for my hand. The FBI agent said there are people here. People from before. The Torino brothers. They found us. Linda closed her eyes. After all these years. Mom, listen to me. The word felt strange, but right. I need you to be strong for a little while longer. Can you do that? She nodded, though I could see the effort it cost her. I turned to Santos. How many agents do you have in the hospital right now? Just me. Like I said, backup is en route. What about hospital security? 6 guards total, but they're not equipped for this kind of situation. I looked around the ICU room, taking inventory of everything available to us. Medical equipment, emergency supplies, communication systems, and something else.
something that had been staring at me since I'd arrived. Santos, what would happen if this entire floor went into lockdown? If there was a medical emergency that required complete isolation? You mean like a contagious disease outbreak? I mean like a code silver. Santos looked confused, but David and Linda both understood immediately. Code Silver was hospital protocol for armed individuals on the premises, an alert that triggered immediate lockdown procedures and law enforcement response. Marcus, Linda whispered, that's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than letting the Torino brothers walk in here and finish what they started 15 years ago? Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, looking harried. Dr. Chen, I'm sorry, but I can't stall these men any longer. They're threatening to involve hospital legal counsel, and administration is caving to the pressure. Dr. Martinez, I need you to trust me. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to pull the emergency alarm in this room. When I do, I need you to immediately call a code silver and initiate full lockdown protocols. Dr. Chen, I can't authorize a code silver without genuine cause. There are armed criminals in this hospital right now, planning to murder patients under your care. Is that genuine enough? Dr. Martinez looked at Santos, who nodded grimly. Ma'am, he's not exaggerating. These men are extremely dangerous. What do you need me to do? She asked. Clear this floor of all non-essential personnel, lock down the elevators, call the police and tell them you have an active threat situation. And whatever happens, don't let anyone onto this floor who isn't law enforcement.
10 minutes later, a team of nurses wheeled Linda's bed into David's ICU room. She was awake now, groggy from the sedatives, but alert enough to understand the gravity of the situation. Marcus? She reached for my hand. The FBI agent said there are people here, people from before. The Torino brothers. They found us. Linda closed her eyes. After all these years? Mom, listen to me. The word felt strange but right. I need you to be strong for a little while longer. Can you do that? She nodded, though I could see the effort it cost her. I turned to Santos. How many agents do you have in the hospital right now? Just me. Like I said, backup is en route. What about hospital security? 6 guards total, but they're not equipped for this kind of situation. I looked around the ICU room, taking inventory of everything available to us. Medical equipment, emergency supplies, communication systems. And something else. Something that had been staring me in the face since I'd arrived. Santos, what would happen if this entire floor went into lockdown? If there was a medical emergency that required complete isolation? You mean like a contagious disease outbreak? I mean like a code silver. Santos looked confused, but David and Linda both understood immediately. Code Silver was hospital protocol for armed individuals on the premises, an alert that triggered immediate lockdown procedures and law enforcement response. Marcus, she reached for my hand. That's incredibly dangerous. More dangerous than letting the Torino brothers walk in here and finish what they started 15 years ago? Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway, looking harried. Dr. Chen, I'm sorry, but I can't stall these men any longer. They're threatening to involve hospital legal counsel, and administration is caving to the pressure. Dr. Martinez, I need you to trust me. In about 2 minutes, I'm going to pull the emergency alarm in this room. When I do, I need you to immediately call a code silver and initiate full lockdown protocols. Dr. Chen, I can't authorize a code silver without genuine cause. There are armed criminals in this hospital right now, planning to murder patients under your care. Is that genuine enough? Dr. Martinez looked at Santos, who nodded grimly. Ma'am, he's not exaggerating. These men are extremely dangerous. What do you need me to do? Clear this floor of all non-essential personnel. Lock down the elevators. Call the police and tell them you have an active threat situation. And whatever happens, don't let anyone onto this floor who isn't law enforcement.
David would recover from his injuries and spend his remaining years in witness protection, working with federal investigators to help rebuild the systems his evidence had revealed as corrupt. We would have regular contact now, supervised visits and phone calls, and even some carefully arranged holidays together. But most importantly, we would have understanding. The recognition that love sometimes requires impossible choices, that protection sometimes looks like abandonment, and that the greatest gifts we give our children are often the ones that cost us the most. As the sun set over the city and the last of the federal agents finished their work on the ICU floor, I sat holding both my parents' hands and felt something I hadn't experienced since I was 13 years old. The complete, unshakable certainty that I was part of a family that would do anything to protect each other, even if it meant walking away, even if it meant 15 years of silence, even if it meant sacrificing everything for the chance that love might be enough to keep the people you care about alive. The legacy my parents had left me wasn't abandonment. It was the understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is letting go. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, letting go is just the first step toward finding your way back home. 5 years later. The cemetery in Denver is peaceful in the way that only places touched by both grief and acceptance can be. I visit Linda's grave every few months now, when my travel schedule allows it, bringing fresh flowers and updates about the life she helped save but never got to fully witness. Today, I've brought white lilies, her favorites, and news that would have made her smile. Dr. Sarah Patterson Chen is officially walking now, I tell the granite headstone that bears only her initials and dates, protecting her identity even in death. 9 months old last week, and already showing signs of the stubborn streak she inherited from both sides of the family. The wind rustles through the trees that shade this section of the cemetery, and I imagine it's Linda's way of laughing. Sarah is named for 2 women who saved my life in different ways. Dr. Sarah Martinez, who made the call that brought me to the hospital that night, and Mrs. Patterson, the foster mother, who taught me that survival could become purpose. I settle into the folding chair I always bring, preparing for the conversation I have with Linda every visit. It's become a ritual of sorts, these one-sided talks where I update her on the life that her sacrifice made possible. The corruption trials wrapped up last month. 67 convictions total, 3 federal judges, a police commissioner, 2 state attorneys general, and more mid-level officials than I can count. Dad's testimony was crucial for at least 20 of those cases. The first time he held his granddaughter, he cried for an hour. She has his eyes and my wife's gentle temperament. And watching him read to her from children's books about brave little animals going on adventures makes something in my chest feel complete in a way I never thought possible. Emily says to tell you hello, I add, though Linda never met my wife. She wishes she could have known you. I've told her all the stories, the good ones from when I was little and the hard ones from later. She understands why you made the choices you did. Emily Chen, Dr. Emily Patterson Chen now, is an ER physician I met during my residency at Denver General. She's one of those people who seems to have been born knowing how to heal both bodies and hearts, and she fell in love with the complicated mess of my family history without ever trying to fix it or simplify it or make it more palatable. When I told her about the foster care and the abandonment and the night I nearly died saving people who had already decided to save themselves, she listened with the kind of attention that said she understood the difference between tragedy and trauma, between surviving and healing. She wants to name the next one David if it's a boy, I tell Linda's grave. Dad doesn't know yet. We thought we'd surprise him at Christmas. The next one, as if more children are a given, as if the future is something we can plan and count on. There was a time when I couldn't imagine having a family of my own, couldn't conceive of creating the kind of vulnerability that comes with loving people who might leave. But Sarah changed that, and Emily's quiet confidence in our future changed the rest. I pull out my phone and scroll through the photos from last weekend. Sarah's first steps, taken in the living room of the house Emily and I bought in the suburbs of Denver. It's the kind of house I dreamed about in foster care, but never believed I'd actually live in. White picket fence, two-car garage, neighbors who wave when they see you checking the mail. Normal in all the ways my childhood wasn't. The foundation is officially launching next month. I continue my update. The Chen Foundation for Families Affected by Organized Crime. We're funding legal assistance, witness protection support, therapy for children whose parents had to make impossible choices. The foundation was Emily's idea, born from late-night conversations about how many other families might have been torn apart by circumstances similar to what David and Linda faced. How many other children might be growing up thinking they were abandoned when really they were being protected. The initial funding came from an unexpected source, the federal government's recovery of assets from the criminal organization David had helped expose. Poetic justice, Santos called it when he helped arrange the grant. Detective Santos, Special Agent Santos now, stops by for dinner whenever he's in Denver. He's become something like an uncle to Sarah, and Emily jokes that she's never seen a federal agent who's so good at peekaboo. He was the one who suggested the foundation, who helped us navigate the bureaucratic maze of establishing a nonprofit that works with witness protection families. We've already helped 12 families, 12 sets of parents who made choices like yours, and 12 children who needed to understand that being left behind can be an act of love. The sun is starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that remind me of the sunrise the morning I first walked into St. Mary's Hospital. That seems like a lifetime ago now, though it's only been 5 years. 5 years since the blood donation that changed everything, since the phone call that brought me face to face with the truth about my past. I've kept working as a trauma surgeon, but I've specialized now in treating children, kids who come into the ER broken and scared, and needing someone who understands that healing is about more than fixing what's damaged. My reputation in pediatric trauma surgery has grown beyond what I could have imagined, and I know it's because I bring something to the operating room that can't be taught. The absolute conviction that every child deserves to be fought for, deserves to be saved, deserves to know that someone will move heaven and earth to keep them alive. Dr. Martinez retired last year. She came to Sarah's baptism. She said she's never forgotten that night, never forgotten how a family can be broken and healed at the same time. Sarah's baptism was a complicated affair from a security standpoint, with federal marshals discreetly positioned throughout the church and David attending via secure video link. But Emily insisted that our daughter should have the ceremony surrounded by all the people who love her, even if some of them had to love her from a distance. Mrs. Patterson was there in person, now 87 and still sharp as a tack. She held Sarah during the service and whispered to her about being brave and kind and strong, about how families come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who have to let you go. She still writes me letters, I tell Linda. Mrs. Patterson, I mean. Old-fashioned letters on real paper, usually with photos of Sarah that I've sent her. She says watching me become a father is the greatest reward of her teaching career. Teaching career. That's how Mrs. Patterson always referred to her work as a foster mother. Not as childcare or crisis intervention, but as teaching. Teaching children how to survive trauma, how to transform pain into purpose, how to build new families from the ashes of broken ones. I check my watch and realize I've been here for over an hour. Emily will be wondering where I am, and Sarah will be ready for her evening bottle and bath. But there's one more thing I need to tell Linda, something I've been saving for the right moment. I'm writing a book, I say to the headstone, about families and choices and the difference between abandonment and sacrifice, about how love sometimes looks like betrayal until you're old enough to understand the bigger picture. The book was Emily's idea, too, suggested during one of those conversations that happen in the middle of the night when you're feeding a baby and the world feels both infinite and intimate. She said my story needed to be told, that there might be other people out there carrying the burden of misunderstood abandonment, other children who needed to know that sometimes being left behind is the greatest gift their parents can give them. I don't know if anyone will want to read it, I admit to Linda, but I need to write it for Sarah, so she'll understand the family she belongs to, for Dad, so the world knows he's a hero instead of a criminal, for you, so people understand that mothers sometimes have to break their own hearts to keep their children safe. A young couple walks past on the path behind me, holding hands and carrying flowers for their own visit. They're probably in their 20s, maybe losing a grandparent or mourning a friend taken too soon. They don't know that they're walking past the grave of a woman who stole $3 million and saved dozens of lives, who abandoned her son to protect him, and died knowing she'd made the right choice. I forgive you, I say quietly. Words I've said before, but need to say again. I forgive you for the blizzard and the foster care and the 15 years of thinking I wasn't worth fighting for. I forgive you for dying before we could have more time together. I forgive you for making choices that saved my life, but broke my heart. The wind picks up, stirring the leaves around Linda's headstone, and I choose to take it as acknowledgement. And I want you to know that I understand now what you were trying to teach me that night, that love isn't about staying, it's about doing whatever it takes to keep the people you love safe. That sometimes the greatest act of courage is walking away. That family isn't about who stays with you, but about who's willing to sacrifice everything for you. I stand up and gather my things, the chair, the empty flower wrapper, the photographs I've shown to a piece of granite, as if it were a living woman eager for news. As I prepare to leave, my phone buzzes with a text from Emily. Sarah took 3 steps today. Can't wait to show you the video.
3 steps. My daughter is learning to walk, learning to move through the world with confidence and determination. She'll grow up knowing that her grandfather is a hero living under an assumed name, that her grandmother died protecting the family she loved, that her father once walked through a blizzard to save people who had already saved him. But more than that, she'll grow up knowing that she's loved completely and unconditionally, that the people who care for her will never ask her to walk through storms alone, that family is something that can be broken and rebuilt and made stronger in the mending. I drive home through the familiar streets of Denver, past the hospital where I work and the school where Sarah will someday learn to read, past the coffee shop where Emily and I had our first date, and the park where we got engaged. This is the life that Linda and David's choice made possible, ordinary and extraordinary, complicated and simple, built on the foundation of a love so strong it was willing to look like abandonment. At home, Emily meets me at the door with Sarah in her arms, and our daughter immediately reaches for me with the kind of trust that takes my breath away. She doesn't know yet about the complexities of family loyalty, about choices between impossible options, about the price of protection. She only knows that when she reaches out, someone reaches back. "How was your visit?" Emily asks, settling beside me on the couch as I hold Sarah. "Good, peaceful." I told her about the book. "What did she say?" I smile, adjusting Sarah so she can see both her parents. The wind picked up. I'm choosing to interpret that as approval. Emily laughs, the sound bright and familiar in our living room filled with baby toys and medical journals and photographs of a family that exists across state lines and federal protection programs, but exists nonetheless. "I got a call from your publisher today," she says. "They want to move up the publication date. Apparently, there's more interest in the story than they expected." The publisher. 6 months ago, that was just a dream, a maybe, a what-if that felt too ambitious to voice out loud. Now it's real. A contract, an advance, a deadline that means the world will soon know about David and Linda Chen, about the night that changed everything, about the complicated mathematics of love and sacrifice. "Are you ready for that?" Emily asks, gently. "For the story to be public?"
I looked down at Sarah, who was fallen asleep in my arms with the easy trust of a child who has never doubted that she's safe. In a few years, she'll be old enough to read about her family's history, to understand the weight of the choices that created the life she's living. I'm ready, I say, and I mean it. The story belongs to more people than just us now. Later that evening, after Sarah's bath and bottle and bedtime story, after Emily has fallen asleep beside me with her hand resting on my chest, I lie awake thinking about time and choices and the strange mathematics of sacrifice. 15 years ago, I was a 13-year-old boy walking through a blizzard, believing I was saving my parents, when really they were saving me. Tonight, I'm a 33-year-old man lying next to my wife and thinking about the daughter sleeping in the next room, about the family that was broken and rebuilt and made stronger in the breaking. The book will be published in 8 months. Blood and Snow, a family story of love, loss, and the true meaning of sacrifice. The title was Emily's suggestion, capturing both the literal elements of the story, the rare blood type that connected us, the blizzard that nearly killed me, and the metaphorical weight of what we all endured. There will be interviews and book tours and probably some criticism from people who think David and Linda should have made different choices. There will be families who recognize themselves in our story and reach out for help. There will be children who finally understand why their parents made decisions that seemed incomprehensible, and parents who find the courage to tell their children truths they've been hiding. But tonight, in the quiet of a house filled with the kind of love I once thought I'd lost forever, I'm not thinking about publication dates or publicity schedules. I'm thinking about the 3 people who shaped me into the man I became. Linda, who taught me that love sometimes requires impossible choices. David, who showed me that courage looks like taking responsibility for the consequences of those choices. And Mrs. Patterson, who proved that families can be chosen and built and healed with patience and determination. I'm thinking about the phone call that changed everything, about the blood donation that brought me face to face with my past, about the moment I chose forgiveness over anger and understanding over resentment.
Most of all, I'm thinking about Sarah, about the story I'll tell her when she's old enough to understand it, about the legacy of love and sacrifice and second chances that she's inherited. Tomorrow, I'll go back to the hospital and save lives. Emily will treat patients in the ER, patching up the broken pieces that life sometimes hands us. Sarah will take more steps, learn new words, grow into the kind of person who understands that family is complicated and love is messy, and sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the hardest packages. And somewhere in Oregon, David will tend his garden and read books at the library and call us to hear about his granddaughter's latest achievements. He'll live with the knowledge that the choice he and Linda made 15 years ago, the choice that looked like abandonment but was really salvation, gave all of us the chance to build something beautiful from something broken. The story isn't over. It may never be over, really, because the best stories are the ones that keep unfolding, that keep teaching us new things about love and forgiveness and the strange, wonderful resilience of the human heart. But the hard part, the part where we didn't understand each other, where love looked like betrayal and sacrifice looked like selfishness, that part is finished. What remains is the easier part, living the life that their choice made possible, raising a daughter who will know she's loved unconditionally, building a family that understands the difference between leaving and letting go. What remains is gratitude for a second chance we never thought we'd get, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest gift we can give our children is the chance to become stronger than we ever were. Sometimes love looks like walking away. Sometimes coming home takes 15 years. Sometimes that's exactly how long it's supposed to take.